Hello, everybody. This is Ben Fama Jr. You are listening to Reality Trip. Thank you guys so much for joining me today. I don't think it's any secret that we live in some very difficult and some very challenging times, especially here in America. And I don't know if you've ever really asked the question, how did we get here? How did America get here? This next film, you guys know I've been bringing on interesting films that I think that are important to this day and age and this time that talk about the stories of what we're going through right now. And this documentary is no exception from this. I've seen a lot of films. You guys know I'm a documentary filmmaker myself. I've seen a lot of films on Elvis Presley. I've seen a lot of films on America. But it's very rare that I saw two important stories being juxtaposition put together to really talk about the rise and fall of not only Elvis Presley, but of America. I'm gonna throw in the trailer real quick, and then I'm gonna bring in the director to talk about it.
Oh, that's Elvis's? That's actually his Rolls Royce.
Damn straight it is.
Oh my God.
The king sat in this car.
I feel like Elvis Presley left a spirit that inspires me.
Now, this is amazing.
You have no idea how hard he hit American culture.
I wonder if you could help me. I was trying to find the house that Elvis Presley lived in.
Ain't had no house over here.
You remember the great Chuck D line?
Elvis was a hero the most, but he never meant to me. Straight up racist, that sucker was simple and plain. Mother him and John Wayne.
You ain't nothing but a... Come on, guys.
The thing that Elvis had was black and it was white. It was all mixed up together.
He was the voice of the country at its best and at its worst.
America is great when America does great things. Well, America's been doing a lot of bad things.
I think that the American dream was always someone's fantasy and someone else's drunken nightmare.
Oh, make us sad, make us sad.
That's where we are in America. We're in the second act, where it's just all gone to hell.
What is wrong with America?
The world just doesn't know where America is headed.
Where does the country go from here?
Then I went to the whale.
He said, I recognize that I'm self-destructive.
I thought he only drove American cars.
True love leaves. I only had one trick up my sleeve. I sing it over and over.
If Elvis is your metaphor for America, we're about to OD.
Till she come back to me.
Such an amazing film, literally one of the best films I've seen this year. My next guest is an Emmy and Peabody award-winning director who has twice won the Grand Jury Prize at the Sundance Film Festival. First in 2005 for Why We Fight, which is also a really great film, and again in 2012 for The House I Live In. So please help me welcome to the show Eugene Jarecki. Eugene, thank you so much for joining me today.
Great to be here.
So this is a super interesting film and a super interesting time. And like I was mentioning before, I've seen a lot of films on Elvis Presley. I've seen films about politics, about America. But you did not only an interesting juxtaposition of bringing both of these stories together, but you also brought it together in a road trip with Elvis Presley's Rolls Royce. Can you tell me a little bit about why you decided to make the film this way and why you decided to talk about this topic?
Well, the story of Elvis in America and the idea to juxtapose them came sort of as the next step in a career where I have always been looking at the challenges facing everyday people in America. This is the place that I've made the subject of my study throughout my career, and it's a place where there is a promise somewhere in the air that is part of the identity of the nation, but we all know that the promise has always been a sort of faltering, broken, deferred promise. One day the long arm of history will bend towards something better. And that promise has preoccupied me my whole career, but there was never a chance before now than to look at it with the poetry and the vivid sort of intensity for the present moment, as looking at the story of Elvis Presley as a kind of a metaphor for the rise and fall of the country itself. And that would have been a rather poetic look at a man and his country, and we were making it in the modern era, so it would have kind of had the past haunt the present. But at one point during the filmmaking process, we learned that his car was about to be auctioned. This 1963 silver Rolls Royce was about to be auctioned. And my first thought was, well, that'd be great. Let's go film the auction. It was a pretty modest idea. I just thought that would be very impactful to see how an artifact from Elvis's time, you know, is sort of salivated over by modern day capitalism, and he's still echoing through our public imagination. But then as we started to plan for the filming of it, a bigger idea came upon us, which was what if we could auction the car ourselves? I mean, how much would it cost? So we went to the financiers of the film and said, would you guys be willing to step up and take the risk on actually buying Elvis's Rolls Royce and making it the sort of picture vehicle of the movie, the story vehicle, pun intended, of the movie? And they understood that it would cost a bunch of money, but they also understood it made it a much bigger, much more epic, you know, a musical road trip across the country. It's like, who doesn't want to make an American road movie?
And then, so when you were actually out on this road trip, did you know what you were getting ready to film? I've seen other interviews where you kind of said, it even says in the film when you're doing, you're talking with somebody and you're wondering, what's this film about? So what is this film about? What was your goal when you were going out there?
Well, it's not entirely aimless. It's not like I just said, oh, gee whiz, I wonder what America's like, and let me go out. I mean, I've been traveling this country for 20 years. I've been in every one of the 50 states over and over, visiting places and meeting people. So it's not about sort of, I was unaware of what I would find, but I certainly made no plan to pigeonhole the movie to learn any particular thing. You wanted to have the beauty of a road trip. If you turned right, it would go one way, the story. And if you turned left, the story would go another way. And if the car broke down, that would lead to some story. And if there was a hitchhiker, that would lead to some other story. And, you know, everywhere we went, things happened to us that were completely unexpected, because we would roll into Memphis or Nashville or New York or Vegas or Hollywood with very, very scant planning. You know, we knew a certain couple of things we might try to get, or we might have reached out to a writer or to a famous person or this or that. But the meat of the movie, the everyday people that we pass with along the way, that's all just the beautiful things that happened on an anything can happen road trip.
I like to explore some of the philosophies that you have in this film, because someone might at first think, well, this is a film about Elvis, this is a film about America, but there's a lot of other underlying hidden philosophies that are actually being talked in here that I really actually like to explore with the film and maybe get some of your opinions on it. One of the first ones is you kind of go into exploring cultural appropriation. And one of the things that was even mentioned in the film is that America is basically one big cultural appropriation. That's what we do. What was the aspect of that, and why did you bring that up in the film?
Well, I think there's no way to make a film about Elvis in the modern era, meaning post-Public Enemy, without dealing with Chuck D's bold implication in that song that Elvis is a racist and was a hero to most, but he never meant blank to me. And I think that I couldn't make a legitimate modern film about Elvis in America without Chuck D. And thankfully, Chuck D, who's an international treasure, is in the film, thinking through a lot of this. But one of the things that he points out is that we have to understand the conversation about cultural appropriation correctly. And at no time did Chuck D ever think that Elvis was a racist because he played black music as a white person. Chuck D is a deep and far-reaching intellect who understands and communicates it better than anybody can in the film, that cultural sharing, it would make the world a better place and a more peaceful place if all of us played each other's music and ate each other's food and understood each other better. He says in the film, you would never tell a young black kid not to play Beethoven because he doesn't have German roots. And likewise, you wouldn't tell Elvis not to play black music. So cultural appropriation does not equal that Elvis drew influences from the black community. That's fantastic. In fact, when he did it in the 50s, it was a bold and daring, great thing to do. The problem then becomes, what does the music business do when it puts Elvis on a pedestal, makes him the king, gives him untold riches and untold power and opportunity? And the people who influenced Elvis so deeply, Bo Diddley, Chuck Berry, others, Howlin' Wolf, those people basically get left by the roadside. And that's the story that Chuck D has seen as an African-American, is just, you know, you want me to worship your heroes, but you want to leave my heroes by the roadside. That's cultural appropriation. That's the white music business stealing influences and then giving the same favoritism to white people that every American industry has done. because every American industry has stolen from black people since the beginning of it all, from the time we stole the black people themselves. So cultural appropriation gets a new definition in this movie, I think much more precise and much more relevant to the modern moment we're in.
Let's explore that a little bit when you're talking about even the business, because I was going to go into like the working class and the divide stuff, but I want to bring up something that I was already going to bring up about the business, especially like when we talk about Hollywood. One of the things that is kind of explored in this is this Hollywood structure system. And you as a filmmaker know that system, probably even more than I do as a filmmaker. And one of the challenges I've always felt is I always felt like Hollywood was kind of like big government. I mean, I'm pretty liberal, but I always felt like Hollywood was this place where your dreams kind of go to die and you don't really have control over that. Do you feel that Hollywood is a structured system that actually helps and benefits artists and people in this day and age? And do you think that Hollywood understands what is going on with new media now?
Well, I think all systems need to be analyzed without the tendency to try to reduce or simplify. There are aspects of the history and even contemporary reality of Hollywood that have brought great ideas to the world, great romance to the world, a great embrace of love and life and humanity to the world. And there are horrendous aspects of Hollywood that are crushing of creativity, crushing of dignity, decency, the human spirit, the elevation of violence in movies, the escalation of capitalism in movies, the sort of unsavory business of the way Hollywood collaborates with the Pentagon to militarize our vision of American life and American greatness. There's very much wrong with the modern hijacking of the sort of glimmers of Hollywood for the purposes of perpetuating this class-driven, white male-driven society. At the same time, Hollywood is also the place where you will see social movements gain poetic expression. You'll see members of the Hollywood community advance certain social causes, leveraging the celebrity that they have and the trust that the public has developed in them. So from a social justice standpoint, Hollywood is decidedly a mixed bag, and I would argue for sure in the contemporary moment, the bad outweighs the good. You know, I'd rather see Hollywood hurt the world less, and I could do without celebrities than having to try to correct it with their celebrity. I'd rather see Hollywood actually function to promote art, and art that is advancing of the human condition, and not just art that is meant to addict the public to self-destructive seductions. So that whole the hijacking of Hollywood by commerce and the degree to which art within Hollywood is used as the kind of bait on the hook that capitalism is setting for all of us in the human race, that part of the Hollywood equation is horrifying. Hollywood's understanding of new media, listen, new media is the digitalization of all that had been in the brick and mortar universe. The digital commons is like a town square from yesterday, and the town square of yesterday, you remember, it had a post office, and it had a general store, and it had a bank, and it had the follies, you know, where they put on those little plays in small communities, and maybe had a church and this and all those aspects that were around that town square. Even the lady with the telephone switchboard, that's all gone now into a digital re-expression. So the bank is online banking. The email is what used to be snail mail. Each thing, the general store is Amazon, and the rest of this pernicious world of exploitative capitalism. Now, what the problem is that it's not that new and different, except it is completely new and different in the sense that that digital commons is a re-expression of the old brick and mortar commons. But we are sleepwalking into this future and not bringing the legal protections of everyday people that had taken generations to build in the brick and mortar world. So the perfect example is your mail. When I was growing up and you would send a letter to somebody and you'd look at weird tasting stuff on the envelope, when you closed it, you had some surety that if the guy on the other end got the letter, or if your sweetheart on the other end got the letter, if it had been open, she'd say to you, "Why'd you send me this open envelope? This could have been read by anybody." You say, "I didn't open it. It was closed." And so you'd know somebody was penetrating your mail. So we knew and could trust the privacy of communications in the snail mail universe. We've entered the email universe, and apparently everybody stopped caring about privacy at all, when all revolutionary change in history required privacy to happen. People needed to be able to have communications private to themselves that were not eavesdropped on by the central power in order that they might question that central power or even overthrow that central power. So just in the same way that we've sleepwalked into an everybody reads our mail future, and we don't seem to care about that loss of privacy, totally anti-democratic development, we're doing that in all aspects of the digital commons. And so I think Hollywood is not going to be exceptional in that. The follies part of town, the entertainment part of town, we had rating systems and protections of information, and we had censorship issues about whether something was being blocked or not. Did we have freedom of information? All those things, when you talk about a net neutrality reduced universe, all of a sudden on one day, you may be finding that your kid is able to watch porn that would have been unavailable to your kid decades ago, and that's because protections have not been carried over effectively. So in other words, that's too much information. And then on another day, you're thinking, how come I can't look up that Russian oligarch who did that criminal thing a year ago? That used to be on a website. Now I can't find it. Has the net been purged of the information that was there, and it's invisible, and now it's gone into the ether? Where's the information? So there are tremendous dangers lying ahead of us in the digital media future, because the new world order of the internet was an opportunity for the powerful in this world to say, you know what, all those laws that took centuries to develop to protect everyday people from the trespasses of the powerful, we have an incredible opportunity. We're entering this new virtual reality, and in that virtual reality, all bets are off. We're going to start again. Magna Carta, out the window. Constitution, out the window. Declaration of Independence, out the window. Geneva Convention, out the window. It goes on and on. That's what the Trans-Pacific Partnership is about. That's what the World Bank is about. That's what the IMF is about. That's what all the abuses and underminings of protections of everyday people the world over are about in the digital media universe. So Hollywood's no dummy. And Hollywood is a major concentration of economic power that is certainly going to seek to profit from that new reality at our expense.
Right, and that's one of the things you bring up in the film is especially like with Elvis, when he went to Hollywood and he was doing things for the actual money. My always concern is, me being a filmmaker myself, is that it's our obligation to get the truth, the best that we can, out to people. And I feel like I'm happy with the democratization to being able to let independent filmmakers to make films. But I also feel like we're competing with people that have much bigger budgets that can either, one, shut us down, or two, we deal with like conspiracy theory type documentaries that spread misinformation. And in a time and age where a film like yours or mine might be extremely important to get out to the people, my worry is that it gets caught up in all this noise and all this media and all the money and all the Hollywood or whatever it is, and getting that message out to people. So what do you feel is the best way to get messages about what we're trying to say out to people?
Well, I was in a photo exhibit this past summer in France, and it was a photo exhibit that happens every year in a town in France that has the biggest photo exhibit in the world, takes over the whole town, and you go kind of building to building looking at pictures by famous photographers. And this year was an interesting year because it dawned on me walking through the photo exhibit, it must be hard to be a photographer these days now that everybody is taking 1 billion pictures an hour. The whole world is constantly selfieing and photographing. And it doesn't mean that the talent of the world's leading photographers has been reduced, or that anybody particularly talented is rising up out of the swamp of selfies that are being taken. But it's just with so much image capture happening all the time, with the way London is the most surveilled city in the world, where there's now a camera every time you turn around anywhere in the world, I almost thought if I was a photographer and I was going to come and do a sort of a breakout exhibit this year, I might come and not bring any photos, because that would dare to be different. There's so many photos everywhere. Maybe the only way to be different is to refrain. And it sounds like a joke, but for example, Thich Nhat Hanh, the Buddhist scholar, says that when you're in a lifeboat after an emergency, everybody in the lifeboat is panicked and they're trying to figure out how they're going to survive and where's land and how many days they got for food to eat and all that. The quiet person in the lifeboat who's doing nothing, the other people, just staying calm and tranquil and not necessarily agitating in one direction or another. People might be annoyed by that person because he doesn't appear to be helping. But you never know in the long stretch of it how that tranquility may steady the lifeboat. When everybody's losing their wits, someone who keeps their wits about them and might be able to have a deeper thought, a longer view consideration, a more balanced approach. There is a type of media thinking, in my view, that says rather than compete with the crass product development that is always going to be more powerfully expressed by concentrated finance, the huge movie studios with the huge investments they have, they're just going to aim for the bleachers on every single project, and they can outspend us and they can outdistribute us and all that. You're never going to get there. So why not just stay authentic? When the music business got its ass handed to it by Napster and the things that followed it, one of the unexpected results was the re-elevation, the re-celebration of bands that could play live, because that disintegration of the music business meant that the record labels suddenly no longer had the same control over the studio product that had become their way of profiting massively and having musicians suffer. Suddenly, with direct access to musicians, the way that musicians had to promote themselves and therefore have a direct relationship with the public was to play live. So bands that could play live and really bring the house down playing live suddenly rose, and bands that were more a figment of the imagination of record executives that couldn't play live suddenly found themselves in a floundering universe. I think the same is true in the movie business. The independent movie making world, whether we're making it for these little devices or whether we're making it for small art houses or whether we're making it for scholastic distribution or institutional showing or whatever else, we want to think athletically about, I have some stuff to show and I want conversations to happen and I want to make my art and have it be perceivable by people. And rather than just aim for the bleachers in some mass communication, or even if I do get over it, it's going to have to get diluted down by what a studio executive pejoratively thinks everyday people think. Let me stay pure, make the thing I think I should make that genuinely tries to reach people. It's not snobby. It's just genuine and real and not compromised by some person who hasn't seen an everyday person in 20 years. It's an authentic piece of communication. And let it find its way. It's never been able to better find its way than in this peer-to-peer universe where we still have some sharing going on and things can become viral. So I believe there's great opportunity continuing until they really do net neutrality us out of that level of communication. That is why the net neutrality fight is so vital, because if that goes any further than it's already going, we can reach a world where you and I wouldn't be doing this right now in an off-piste kind of way.
I also question the reasoning of us doing stuff like this. Whether it's being an Instagram star or YouTube star. Actually, what I'm trying to get into is fame. And you do a good job of showing the rise of Elvis Presley and how fame had affected him. You even have Ashton Kutcher in the film, and he talks about being, feeling like he's trapped. How he, like he feels like he created this kind of monster, and now that he has to live with it. And it seemed like that was like kind of the downfall. That's what was trapping people. Us as filmmakers, as media people, I mean, we want people to hear our messages, but I also think, it's no secret that a lot of filmmakers want to be famous, but one of the things that I always realize when I study other people that are famous, obviously I'm not a super famous person, but I tend to find that once you reach that goal and you get to that point, that not a lot of people are very happy. There's something still missing about them. And so you wonder, as someone like, especially like me on the ladder of life where I'm at, and I look at these other people that are much more famous than me, what is it we're trying to achieve? I don't do this for the sake of fame, but I'm just saying that when I see people that are successful, and I've been around people, it doesn't seem that they're any more happier once they reach those goals. And that's what I noticed about Elvis Presley. There was still something missing. He had all the money, he had all the fame, he had all the women, and yet there was still something missing about him.
I mean, listen, we interviewed a lot of famous people for this film, and I can say across the board, and I say it with a lot of compassion, there's not one famous person in this film who is free from the disfiguring impact of celebrity on their lives. Every single one of them has restrictions that they feel on their freedom to communicate, their freedom to be, their freedom to act naturally with you, with a camera, without a camera. You can feel the crushing weight of the outside world and its demands and its threats and its seductions. You can see it all play out in their body language, in their way of answering questions. And I think the celebrities in my film are some of the most well-adjusted celebrities in the world. You know, you talk to people like Ethan Hawke and Mike Myers and Chuck B and Roseanne Cash and Emmylou Harris, and you know, within the caveat that they're a celebrity, they're doing it as naturally as they can. But they will tell you they made a Faustian bargain along the way to get their expression out wide, and that has a tremendous price tag. And that's something almost mathematical in the human experience. It's like you can't have this without that. You know, you can't have Falstaff and have him thin. Comes with the territory. Now, should it? Does it have to? Talk to me when we figure out a new global system other than capitalism. Because capitalism commodifies human beings, and at the upper level, that makes you a celebrity. At the lower level, it makes you a slave.
That's what it feels like these days, is that it's about the amount of followers, it's about the amount of money that you make. And I get it. I'm not like, oblivious to it. I just feel like sometimes there's deeper things that are being lost in this conversation, because you're not like, you're more likely to be taken seriously because you're a celebrity than someone who might authentically be authentic and may want to tell the truth. I mean, the truth is not always a very popular thing, and I understand that. But I also feel like sometimes it is still important to discover that truth, despite if you're a celebrity, despite if you have all that. And so the challenge is sometimes for a lot of people is to, where do we find that balance? How do we stay true to ourselves and be authentic and be real and not, be full of shit, and then not be changed by the fame, the money, and the lure? One of the things you bring up in the film is about Las Vegas. And I was born and raised in Las Vegas. I'm in Las Vegas right now, and I really love what you did by showing the rise and fall of Elvis and him being here in Vegas and the lore that he has about being here. So talk to me a little bit about that part of the film. What made you decide to explore Las Vegas? I do want to read a quote real quick that I really do love from the film that you brought up, and I really want to explore this. It says, most people don't understand Vegas. They understand it backward. They think it's a city of fantasy and deceit, when in fact, it's probably the most pure and honest expression of the values of our society. As being someone who's born and raised in this town, what did you mean by that? Or what did they mean by that?
Well, there was a time when Las Vegas was Sin City, and what that meant to the nation was that it was like a kind of it was like a kidney that would take, or a liver. It was like the liver of the country. All the grungy, dirty, impure stuff would get spilled out there and sort of worked through there, and it kept the rest of the society sort of cleaner in that. A husband would go there with his paycheck, and he'd leave home and leave the kids and his spouse at home, and he'd go there and live out his addictions or seductions, and lose a bunch of money and exercise a bunch of demons, and then he'd go back home and maybe live a somewhat cleaner life on Main Street. What has happened over the years with the corporate takeover of Las Vegas, when it went from being run by the mob to being run by the corporations, was that they decided to facelift Las Vegas and clean up that image. And Elvis was an instrumental part of the cleanup of Las Vegas, because he's as American as apple pie, as Mark Cooper, the journalist you're quoting, says in the film. He was used to sort of gloss over the conversion of Las Vegas from something for just the sinful part of our lives to something much more domesticated and brought into our lives. So the Disney makeover that Vegas has received means that now we're feeding the toxins of Vegas to our children. We're starting them early. We're bringing them here and exposing them to this unchecked greed machine that is in the business of exploiting their frailties and profiting from it, and addicting them in all manner of addiction, seducing them with everything from the flashing lights to the nudity to the all-you-can-eat to the sort of 24-hour clockless, hyper-oxygenated sort of experimental gerbil wheel that starts them young and then gets them on a lifetime of seduction and addiction. I think Las Vegas has made Sin City Sin Nation. And now that you see you can see that play out now where I was just driving by Springfield, Massachusetts, and I read a couple of years ago that Springfield was one of the most violent and dangerous and impoverished inner cities in America. And now there's a sign on the highway that says an ad for MGM Casino, and it says no longer in the middle of nowhere, now it's in the center of town or something like that. And they've put an MGM Casino right in the center of this impoverished town, which means the people there will think, hey, some jobs are coming. I can work in the kitchen of a casino, or I can work at a craps table or something like that. Well, yeah, but have you ever seen what happens to the areas that surround casinos and how the people live there, and the balancing act between the little pissant jobs they get to have and the destruction, soul-crushing that their lives will undergo, when on the one hand they might make a few more bucks, but on the other hand they're going to get it sucked out of them by this seduction machine until they're poorer than if it had never come?
Yeah, and I don't think people really realize that being here, the amount of psychology that goes into getting people to think the way they do. I worked as a security supervisor for many years in the casino, and I know this town like the back of my hand. And growing up here, you have this perspective about the world as everything is a psychological manipulation. That's how it feels to me. This might sound a little crude, but I feel like it's a woman with her legs wide open, ready for you to get an STD. That's how it feels like to me. It feels like there's all this glitz and this glamour. And I think that's maybe maybe that warped my own perspective, and maybe that's why I challenge Hollywood and even the American dream. Is I feel like it's all a bunch of psychological bullshit to get you to believe something that may not actually be true. And I feel like people's lives be affected. You're right. I do see that. I saw people, I know people right now with serious addictions here. I've had to call people at a security place telling them that, their husband's dead because he shot himself up in a room from gambling all night. I've seen worse than most people in Vegas seen. And bringing that in here, and that's how I feel about the American dream. And that's what I really love about what you did with this film, is you really put together this kind of illusion that we've built in the psychology that we've built about America and ourselves. And some of us are questioning, what is the truth? What is the reality? Because I'm not winning these jackpots. I'm not winning these mega bucks. I'm not even to try to be a millionaire, but whatever has been portrayed to me has not been real. Do you feel that's the same analysis of what you're trying to cover in the film?
Listen, I think that's how we got where we are. People like to focus on the current president, but it's much more important to focus on the deep reality that produced this crisis, meaning the way that such a horrendous development as his election happened. The reason it happened wasn't overnight. It happened because this country has been run by elite forces, families, corporations who hoard wealth, and they have run it to their benefit at the expense of everybody else for so long that people got their hearts broken by the broken promise of the American dream. And when you break people's hearts and you make them desperate, they become desperate, and they'll reach out to all manner of wrong-headed, hopeful solution. So in walks a charlatan like the current executive, and he tells them a whole bunch of lies, and they fall for it, and this is happening all over the world. We see strong men rising in societies all over the world because all they have to do is say to people, I know you're desperate. That guy, that other poor person, that Mexican, that immigrant, that refugee, they're the reason. So they point to an absolute weakling. They point to a person who's struggling like crazy, and they make an everyday person turn on that person rather than looking at the real problem, which is you, everyday person, I'm screwing you. If I was honest with you, I'd tell you I'm your problem. But I'm not going to tell you that. I'm going to tell you to go beat up on that guy, keep you guys busy for a while I keep counting my profits over here. That's what's really happened. And that's happening all over the world. That's not just America. We're just particularly heartbroken because it shouldn't be happening in America if we believe that the promise of America meant anything, that it was supposed to be any different from the other predatory countries in this world. That's what's heartbreaking, and that's why America is a kind of case study in, as goes America, will the world go there next? And we see it sliding all over the world toward this kind of concentrated power, fascism, and its link with corporatism.
Yeah, and I hope that I'm not saying documentary filmmaking is going to be the savior to all things, but I feel like that's why documentaries, especially like yours, are some of the most important of our time right now. One of my all-time favorite documentary filmmakers, which happens, I think, is executive producer of your film, is Errol Morris. Like the truth of documentaries and being able to speak these truths to people and get them to know and understand it, because you're not getting a lot of media, I mean, they're talking about it, but I don't think they're getting into the core of it and being able to tell the story. And that's what I really loved about your film. It was beautiful. Not only was it a story about Elvis, it was a story about America. And you put it together in such a beautiful, dramatic way that is really impactful. And I think films like that need to be out there more. You see all these Transformer films and whatever, and I get that, but I feel like this is the time for documentary films to be made and to be heard and to be said. And so I really thank you for making this film.
Glad to be here and glad to be talking to you about it.
So I would just want to wrap up real quick, but is there anything else you'd like to talk about that maybe any other interview nobody really talked about or brought up to you? Because I mean, I know if you watch this film and you watch a lot of interviews that you did, people usually talk about the same type of stuff. But is there something that maybe someone hasn't brought up or you want to talk about that you'd like people to know about what it is that you're doing with this film?
Well, I think documentaries in this modern era that we're living through run the risk of breaking bad news to people all the time. And when you break bad news to people, when you say, hey, I know you think the world is struggling, boy, it's even worse than you think. Let me show you what's happening to the whales, or let me show you what's happening with why there's more flooding, or let me show you what's happening to education or healthcare, whatever subject area your film is about. You run the risk of talking to working people who are already struggling and just burying them in negativity. And so you become like a merchant of despair. Big white men are destroying the prospects for democracy and dignity and decency all over the world. And I'm a big white guy and I'm going to charge you a ticket price to tell you the story of how it happened. It's immoral. If I don't have a purpose to be able to help change this problem and help move us toward a better tomorrow, I don't know what I'm doing with myself. And I hope that the Elvis film, and I hope this would be true of any film I make, is meant to arm people partly with a true and honest reflection of the challenges we face, but also with a sort of flicker, a glimmer of the human spirit that has, frankly, all through time, faced this kind of adversity, this kind of oppression, and come up with ideas that have shaken the world and moved us now, ever by inch forward. It's never been vaulting leaps and bounds because democracy is difficult. The obstacles are formidable. Greed in the world is a story that goes back probably to the cavemen. And it takes some really indirect thinking, some really compassionate, abstract thinking to understand why I shouldn't just take the one banana and eat it if there's two of us, because that's not sustainable. That's just an instant banana thrill. That's not a long-term vision. If there was a way that we could plant some bananas and then we could work out down the road how we'd all get some bananas, that would be a sophisticated way for the creature to interact with our surroundings. But instead, we've been in greed mode for centuries, and we're learning that the environment alone has sent us a memo. Newsflash, guys, it's not going to work that way going forward. If you don't have some systems of collective sharing, preparedness, reason, conflict resolution, not through violence. If you don't have that, this ain't going to last. You're going to blow this whole thing up. So I think that is where I hope my movie can be part of the increasing movement that I see in every direction. Listen, the current president is one of the worst human beings in the history of man, and I think he's certainly the worst president this country has had, and I think people don't need to be told that. What they do need to be reminded, and it's kind of extraordinary, is that on his watch, the most significant social movements of my lifetime have been born. Me Too, Time's Up, Black Lives Matter expanding, Colin Kaepernick getting the footprint of Nike. I have mixed views on that, but it's still a huge thing to watch a giant corporate beast blink and recognize how many young African-American people are going to be in their client list, and that they put their money down on Colin. The poor people's movement, the teachers who are striking in states that haven't seen a strike of collective bargaining in decades, steel workers striking. Everywhere you look, the Parkland students staring down the barrel of the NRA, one of the most pernicious organizations in U.S. history. These are incredible developments, and they are playing out right in front of us. We need to be a part of those developments, to be part of the inch-by-inch way that democracy advances. Victor Hugo said, more powerful than the tread of a mighty army is an idea whose time has come. And I think the only thing that's not in that quote is that the idea whose time has come may move with very slow and methodical treads, and we may wish it would happen at the speed of FedEx or of a text message, but it doesn't. It takes enormous work and it takes enormous patience, and if we're not ready for that, we're going to lose this game globally. And if we are ready for that, it'll be an extraordinary story in poetry.
Well, hopefully we value the documentary format in the sense that it helps to expand on these truths. I don't think we can understand the problems in quick sound bites on the news all the time. I watch the news like anybody else, but when you're talking about things like your films with the prison system or with politics, it's like what I loved about documentary films was getting into that meat of it. And it may feel overwhelming, but then it's also a way to learn how to solve the problems. That's what you're saying about systems. I think in order for us to build a better system, we need to understand, well, how does the systems work? How does our minds work? How does greed work? I mean, and that's the power that I feel that a documentary can truly do in its value prospect. It may not be, the Transformers or Hollywood, but if it creates an actual social change and getting someone to think, especially someone like me who dropped out of high school and didn't know anything about politics. I basically spent the last 15 years just watching, documentaries, and I feel like it's opened and expanded the way that I see the world. That's why I want to be a filmmaker, is watching films like yours and saying, how do we better communicate this to the world? It's not just about the fame and being an Ashton Kutcher or Elvis Presley. And I feel like that's what Elvis Presley was kind of missing. He kind of did it for this kind of fame, but there was this true authenticity and core that he was never be able to do. That's what I love about documentary filmmaking, and that's what I love about your film and what you do. So thank you so much.
I understand it. Thank you. And to be fair to Elvis, and you have to be fair to people when you're critical of them and you love them and everything else. It's tough love. Elvis was the first person that this happened to become a supernova like that. He wasn't prepared for it. I don't know that I'd be prepared for it. I don't know what would happen to me today if somebody walked in the house and said, here's billions of dollars to sell your soul. Am I really going to say, you got the wrong guy? I'd say, well, what do you mean by selling your soul? And now we're already negotiating. Now they already have a piece of it. Now I'm going to start explaining to my friends, well, the guy came in and he said it's not really just, selling toxic chemicals. It's actually, they're good for grass, and they also might lead to, it's all, we're seduced by so much. I mean, all of us know that Facebook is destructive to modern life, but we use Facebook, right? We drive our car knowing that the gas that's in the car is imperiling our children's future. Yet we drive the car anyway. We haven't, thrown it all to the wind and start growing rutabagas on the roof of the building. So we're all part of the dangerous bargains that are part of the commodified life of a capitalist universe. And until it's otherwise, we have to make very difficult decisions on that balancing act. And the trouble is, when it has been otherwise, when people ran a non-capitalistic world, it was either royalism and feudalism, exploiting people in that way, or it was the monster of communism, hijacking the ideas of Karl Marx and turning them into a different form of oppression. So we need a new discovery on how human beings can be organized in a way that's fair, just, and doesn't squash the human spirit. I think the social democracies of Europe, when they were thriving 20 or 30 years ago, I think they were a good example of it. They were imperfect. They led to the exploitative Europe of today, but they had something going there. And I think it made the powerful in America uncomfortable, actually, because it was too generous a society. And we helped to dismantle those societies' commitment to human dignity. And so we're pushing the world in the wrong direction, of course. But I think people are waking up, and it'd be interesting to see what we think the world is going to look like.
Well, I sure hope so, because I know it's very challenging for a lot of people right now. I mean, look at the Supreme Court hearings. It seems like, I'm sorry?
As we speak.
Yeah, as we speak, with the Supreme Court hearings and stuff. And I know a lot of people probably feel jaded. Look, I'm angry. I'm frustrated. Some days I feel like, man, I just want to, shut down and do this. But if there's anything we've learned from history, is that this is not the time to bury your head in the sand. This is not the time. This is the time to look at these stories, look at an analysis to what is actually going on in the world. Because I'm not depending on the government to fix everything at the moment right now. As in a democracy, it's us as citizens that have to be informed in order to put those type of people. But we got to know what kind of system. It's one thing to be a revolutionary, but it's another thing to know what are you going to replace it with. I've seen so many revolutionaries come in and they're just like the tyrants that were there before them. So having that thought process and be able to understand those systems correctly, I think helps us better to actually do that. So
I agree.
Well, the movie is The King, ladies and gentlemen. I'm telling you, go watch this film. It is an amazing documentary film. We only went into some of the pretext of it. It's much more deeper than that, and it's a really great film. If I want to send people to it, where do you have it available online right now?
It's on iTunes, and you can also go to theking.film as a website and learn more about it.
Okay. And I'll have all those descriptions in the link below. If you guys have any problems, just come to my website, obviously on my YouTube. And if you guys are listening to this on iTunes and Stitcher, I'll have all the links there below. So, Eugene, thank you so much for joining me today. Thank you for fighting the good fight. I really do appreciate it.
Same here. Take care.
So that's our show for the day, folks. I'm Ben Fama Jr. If this is your first time here, make sure that you like and subscribe, and we'll be back next week. Thank you.